Princess Alira stood in the center of the Zalith throne room, her heart pounding in her chest as hundreds of cold alien eyes stared down at her. The floor beneath her feet shimmered with the light of the twin suns above the glass ceiling, but even their warm glow couldn't chase away the chill in her bones. Her father, King Vorax, sat tall on his high throne, his body wrapped in gleaming armor, his voice sharp like the blade he always kept near. Around him stood generals, nobles, and warlords, every one of them armed, proud, and ready for war. Alira was none of these things. She had been raised behind palace walls, surrounded by silence and shadows, not swords and fire. Her limbs were slim, her voice quiet, and her presence often ignored. Among the mighty Zalith, she was considered a flaw, a crack in the strong stone of the royal bloodline. Her father had never spoken a kind word to her. And now, without warning, he called her forward and announced that she would be given away to the humans. Gasps filled the chamber, but no one objected. They all knew this was his way of casting her out, a political move wrapped in false honor. He claimed it was a gesture of peace, offering his daughter as a sign of goodwill to the Terran Union, but the sneer on his face made the truth clear. She was being discarded, humiliated, given to a race the Zalith once saw as weak and unworthy. Her legs trembled as human soldiers approached from the other side of the chamber, led by a tall man with gray eyes and battle-scarred armor. He looked at her, not with scorn or pity, but with quiet curiosity. This was Commander Jace Thorn, the leader of the Terran vessel Valkyrie and a hero to his people. He had seen war, survived it, and shaped others to do the same. As Alira stepped toward him, her father turned his back without a word. The throne room doors closed behind her like the end of a life she never truly lived. Alira boarded the human ship in silence, unsure of what to expect. Everything felt strange, the way the walls hummed with power, the way the crew moved with purpose, the warmth in their eyes when they spoke to each other. She was not mocked, not shamed. She was watched, yes, but not with hate. She didn't understand it. She didn't trust it. She was placed in a clean room with soft lights and a small window showing the stars. For the first time, she saw the galaxy from outside her cage. Commander Thorn met her alone in the observation deck later that night. He didn't speak right away, and neither did she. After a long silence, he finally said, "You've been thrown to us like a broken tool. But I don't see a tool. I see someone waiting to become something." She turned to him, confused. No one had ever spoken to her like that. He offered her a choice: stay hidden in her room, or learn, fight, and grow. She said nothing at first, but something inside her shifted. The same fire that had always burned low, hidden deep inside her chest, flickered to life. She nodded. From that moment on, her journey began. Not as a princess, not as a gift, but as someone forgotten by her people and picked up by the very race they once looked down upon. She didn't yet know what she would become, but the stars outside whispered promises. And Commander Thorn watched her with the eyes of a man who had seen potential where others saw only weakness. Alira's new life began before the stars even changed outside the Valkyrie's windows. Each morning she woke to the blaring siren of drills and orders shouted through the halls. The humans moved fast, their footsteps loud, their bodies strong and sure. She struggled to keep up. Her body, soft and unused to the harsh rhythms of military life, ached with every stretch and movement. Her breath caught during basic exercises. Her hands trembled when she held a training weapon. Some of the soldiers laughed quietly behind her back. Others didn't bother hiding their look eyes that said she didn't belong. But Alira remembered Jace Thorn's words, the weight behind them, and chose not to run. Instead, she pushed herself harder. When the others finished their sets, she stayed behind, repeating drills until her legs gave out. She slipped, fell, bruised her knees, but stood again. Commander Thorne didn't go easy on her. He trained her like any other soldier. He taught her how to hold her stance, to use her alien flexibility to her advantage. He didn't just show her how to fire a weapon. He showed her when to fire it, why to fire it, how to breathe between the beats of battle. Day by day, her hands grew steadier. Her eyes grew sharper. She started to move faster in combat simulations, dodging and striking with a style unlike anyone else on board. She was learning to blend what she knew of Zalith grace with the raw fire of human training. In the evenings, while the ship hummed quietly through the dark, she stayed alone in the practice room, repeating movements with smooth, steady motions, her mind quiet and clear. Some soldiers started noticing. One of the engineers, Ramos, gave her a repaired training drone to spar with. A medic named Talia brought her protein supplements without asking. Slowly, walls came down. The crew started seeing not a princess or a foreigner, but a warrior in the making. Still, the journey wasn't easy. One day, during a zero-G drill, she slammed into a wall and cracked her shoulder. Jace visited her in the medbay, arms crossed, calm and firm. "You won't break if you don't stop trying," he said. She nodded, teeth clenched through pain. Even in recovery, she trained with her uninjured arm. She refused to stop. She didn't want to be a symbol of weakness anymore, not for the Zalith, not for herself. What surprised her most wasn't the pain or the bruises. It was the way humans fought, not just with strength, but with something deeper. They fought because they had people to protect, homes to return to, stories to write. She had never seen war like that. It wasn't just destruction. It was purpose, meaning. That idea began to grow inside her. Every time she blocked an attack, every time she stood again after being knocked down, she was carving out her own story. Not her father's, not the throne's. Hers, one night. After a long sparring match, she stood alone in front of the ship's mirror. Her reflection stared back, face marked with sweat, bruises under her eyes, muscles forming where none had been before. She didn't look soft anymore. She didn't feel afraid. Something new shined behind her gaze steel, resolve, something earned, not given. She ran her fingers along her arms, surprised at the strength she now held. The girl who had stepped into the human ship, silent and small, was fading away. In her place stood someone else. Someone stronger. Someone ready. The Zalith had called her useless. But here, among humans, she had found a place. Not because they needed her blood or her title, but because she was willing to fight, bleed, and rise. And she would keep rising, no matter how high the cost. The silence of deep space broke when the emergency sirens echoed through the Valkyrie. Red lights flashed across the halls as soldiers rushed to their stations, weapons in hand, faces tight with focus. The message came through fast and clear. Vesper 4. A peaceful human colony was under attack by Zalith raiders. Fires burned across its surface, and civilians were caught in the crossfire. Commander Jace Thorne stood at the center of the command deck, barking orders as the ship prepared for deployment. In the corner, Alira stood still, heart pounding, suited in human armor for the first time. She had trained for weeks, pushed herself through pain and doubt, but this was real. No simulations, no second chances. When her name was called for the drop team, she stepped forward without hesitation. As the dropship launched toward the burning colony, she gripped the safety bar tightly, her breath steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. Around her, hardened Marines loaded weapons, made quiet jokes, checked each other's gear. Alira said nothing. Her mind focused on what she had to do. As the hatch opened, the noise hit her first screams, blasts, the roar of alien gunships above the city. Vesper 4, once green and calm, was a war zone. The squad hit the ground running, dodging debris and returning fire. Drones buzzed through the smoke, scanning for survivors. Buildings burned. Shadows moved behind walls. The Zalith raiders were fast and brutal, trained to kill and vanish. Illyra moved with her squad, ducking behind a fallen wall, heart racing. A child cried out from a ruined house, and without thinking, she broke from cover, rushing into danger. Shots rang past her ears. She reached the child, pulled them close, and shielded them with her body as her team laid down covering fire. Once safe, she passed the child to the medic and rejoined the fight. Her body moved almost on instinct now. The training, the pain, the bruises, the drills, it all came back. She darted between wreckage, aiming with precision, striking with speed. When their unit got pinned in an alley, she saw an opening. Without waiting for an order, she climbed the rubble, flanked the enemy, and disabled their position with a mix of human tactics and Zalith agility. It wasn't just bravery. It was skill, the kind that earned respect. By the end of the mission, dozens of civilians had been saved, the raiders had been pushed back, and the squad had made it out alive because of her. In the medbay afterward, covered in ash and scratches, Illyra sat quietly while a tech patched a cut on her shoulder. A Marine across from her, face half wrapped in gauze, looked at her with a slow nod. "You fought like hell," he said. "You're one of us now." The words hit her harder than any weapon. She didn't answer, but inside, something swelled. Not pride. Not victory. Belonging. For the first time in her life, she had done something that mattered. Not because of her name, but because of her choice. She had saved lives. She had stood in the fire and held the line. That night, staring out the window of her quarters as stars passed slowly outside, she didn't feel like a guest anymore. She felt like a soldier, a warrior, one of humanity's own. And though the war was only just beginning, she knew now that she was ready to fight it. Illyra stood in the Valkyrie's training hall, her hands wrapped tight, sweat dripping from her forehead as she moved through her combat drills with speed and grace. Her body no longer trembled under the pressure. It had become sharp, fast, and focused. Around her, soldiers watched with quiet respect. The same people who once doubted her now studied her movements, trying to copy the way she struck or dodged. She had earned her place not by force, but by fire. Whispers of her bravery on Vesper 4 had traveled fast through the fleet. Some called her the Ghost Blade, a nod to her smooth, silent speed. She didn't smile when she heard it, but deep down it meant something. She was no longer just the alien girl. She was someone others looked up to. Jace Thorne noticed it too. He watched as other recruits followed Illyra's training routine, how even the senior Marines asked her to join simulations. Her strange style, a mix of Zalith fluidity and human aggression, made her unpredictable and deadly. She had become a bridge between two worlds. But peace didn't last long. During a raid on a pirate signal post, the Valkyrie captured a Zalith spy. He was dragged into the ship's brig, bloodied but smiling with sharp teeth. When Illyra walked in, his grin grew wider. "Little ghost," he sneered in their native tongue, "I almost didn't recognize you. They dress you like a warrior, but you'll always be the king's shame." She didn't flinch. She stood tall, eyes cold and steady. "You're wrong," she said quietly. "I was his shame. But not anymore." The spy laughed, eyes glowing with cruel amusement. "Your father is coming. Earth will burn. And you'll die a traitor, not even worth remembering." His words tried to dig into her like claws, but they didn't hurt the way they once would have. Illyra turned away from the cell without replying. She didn't need to prove anything to him. She had already proven it to herself. That night, she joined Jace on the command deck, watching the stars roll by. "Do you believe what he said?" she asked him, her voice calm. "About your father coming?" Jace replied, eyes fixed on the map of moving fleets. "Yes, we've seen the build-up. War is near." Elira nodded. There was no fear in her. This time, only fire. "Then we don't wait for them to come," she said. "We get ready. We fight back." Jace looked at her and smiled, not as a commander, but as someone proud. "You're not a gift anymore, Elira. You're a soldier." Maybe even something more. Across the ship, her story was already being told. Young soldiers trained harder, watching her old battle footage. Veterans spoke her name with respect. In her quiet strength, they saw hope. Elira didn't seek glory. She didn't need applause. She only needed to keep rising, because war was coming. And this time, she would not run from her past. She would face it with a blade in her hand and the power of humanity behind her. The moment the Zalith warfleet broke through the outer defense lines and struck Luna Base, the solar system trembled. The moon, Earth's closest defense stronghold, shook under the heavy blasts of plasma fire as giant Zalith cruisers dropped. From warp space, their weapons glowing, their formations tight and deadly. Sirens wailed across the human fleet. Ships scrambled to respond. The Valkyrie was already moving, its crew ready, eyes hard. Elira stood on the bridge in full armor, her pulse steady as the hologram showed Luna Base burning and human ships falling. Commander Jace gave the order to launch, and the ship roared forward like a blade through the stars. As the battle began, chaos filled the void. Human ships tried to hold the line, but the Zalith outnumbered and outgunned them. Elira climbed into a special fighter one that she had helped design using both human and Zalith tech. It moved like nothing else, fast, silent, and dangerous. As she dropped into the fight, she saw human pilots struggling to keep formation, some panicking, others overwhelmed. She didn't hesitate. With her deep knowledge of Zalith tactics, she broke through. Their lines, darting between enemy ships, hitting weak points, guiding other pilots through maneuvers they had never practiced. Her calm voice over the comms steadied them, and her actions gave them hope. She wasn't just fighting, she was leading. With every strike, she turned the tide. When an enemy cruiser began targeting refugee transports near the base, she flew. Straight at it, dodging blasts, cutting into its engine core with precise shots. The explosion lit up the darkness. Cheers crackled through comms. Her presence was changing the battle. Jace, watching from the bridge, moved his forces where she led, using her instincts to predict enemy moves. Together they pushed back, but victory didn't come easily. Dozens of human ships were lost. Friends Elira had trained with were gone. In an instant, their last screams silenced by fire. On the surface of Luna, emergency teams fought to hold what remained. Later, when the dust settled and the fleet limped back to regroup, Elira walked the medbay in silence. She saw faces broken by grief, bodies wrapped in bandages, empty beds where others should have been. She didn't cry in front of them. She nodded to each soldier she passed, a quiet sign of strength. But when she reached her quarters, she collapsed to her knees, silent tears falling. She had fought like a warrior, but the cost had been high. Jace found her there, sitting on the floor, eyes red but dry now. He didn't speak at first. Then he said softly, "Grief is the cost of love, and love is why we fight." She looked up, nodded slowly, and stood. Her sorrow didn't make her weak. It reminded her why she couldn't stop. Humanity had bled that day, but it hadn't broken. They had held the line because they had something worth protecting. And now so did she. Elira sharpened her blade and stepped back into the war room, ready to lead once more. The moon still turned. The fight was far from over. Elira stood before the command table in the war room. the stars glowing behind her as the fleet officers argued about defense plans and fallback positions. The memory of Luna still burned in their minds, friends lost, ships destroyed, scars left on Earth's doorstep. Some wanted to wait to strengthen shields and build more ships. But Alira stepped forward, voice clear and strong, and said the words that silenced the room. "We hit them first." Eyes turned to her, some in shock, others curious. A few nodded slowly. She proposed a strike not on a forward base or supply line, but on the heart of the Zalith Empire's Zalen Prime, their capital. It was bold, dangerous, almost unthinkable. But she spoke with the fire of someone who had lost too much and had nothing left to fear. Jace Thorne stood beside her and gave his support. "We've always waited for them to strike. Let's make them feel what it's like to bleed at home." After long hours of planning and resistance, the council agreed. The mission would be small and fast, a single strike team carried by the Valkyrie through stealth routes, using stolen codes and Alira's knowledge of Zalith systems. As the crew prepared, she walked through the ship, seeing every face, every nod, every quiet smile. They were ready to follow her, not because she was a princess, but because she had become one of them. When they reached the outer edge of Zalith space, tension filled every corridor. The stealth systems worked. They passed enemy patrols like shadows. Alira stood in her armor, her blade on her back, and stared at the glowing blue sphere of Zalen Prime, her old home. The drop team entered the fortress orbiting the capital, moving through silent halls with practiced steps. Everything felt too clean, too cold. The same walls she once walked as a child now felt like a cage. They placed explosives in the shipyard controls and power nodes. No alarms, no guards. But the real test came when Alira reached her old chamber. The room was untouched, dustless, perfect, frozen in time. The same bed, the same tiny necklace she had worn as a girl, still hanging from the wall. She stepped forward slowly, fingers brushing the carved metal charm. Then, without a word, she took it off the wall and placed it on the desk. She didn't need it anymore. That life was over. She was not that girl. As she turned to leave, enemy footsteps echoed in the hall. A firefight broke out. They fought hard and fast, escaping just before the charges blew. From orbit, the Valkyrie crew watched the explosion light up the fortress like a dying star. The enemy's pride, their core of power, now smoldered. The raid sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Zalith had never been touched like this. Alira had returned not as a prisoner or a gift, but as fire. She had struck her father's empire and lived. And now they knew she was coming back for the rest. As the ship jumped away from the burning wreck, she stood beside Jace, silent and strong. This time, the Zalith would not attack a weak planet. This time, they would face the storm that she had become. The sky above Earth turned dark as the Zalith Armada arrived, blotting out the stars with its massive warships, a flood of metal and fire stretching across space. The final battle had come. Earth's defense fleet rose to meet them, engines burning. Blue, weapons charged, and hearts filled with both fear and fire. Commander Jace stood at the center of the command deck, giving orders with calm precision, his voice steady even as the screens filled with red marks showing enemy ships. Beside him stood Alira, no longer just a warrior, but a symbol of strength. She wore armor of black and silver, half Terran metal, half Zalith alloy, built with care and vision. Behind her, in the main hangar, waited the hybrid warship she had helped design, a fast and deadly fighter that moved like a ghost and hit like a storm. As the call to launch echoed through the ship, Alira stepped into her vessel, closed the hatch, and flew into the heart of battle. The space around Earth turned into chaos. Human ships clashed with Zalith cruisers, explosions lighting up the void. Fighters weaved through wreckage, dodging plasma blasts. Alira led the front line, her ship darting between enemy vessels, striking at weak points with perfect timing. She moved like she could see the future, her knowledge of Zalith tactics giving the humans an edge they had never had before. Enemy formations crumbled where she struck. She gave quick commands over the comms, guiding pilots, warning of traps, opening paths for counterattacks. With every maneuver, more enemy ships fell. But the Zalith still had numbers. Their king, Vorax, led from his enormous flagship, surrounded by elite destroyers, driving toward Earth's orbit with deadly force. Human losses grew, one by one. Brave pilots went silent. A Terran cruiser exploded just above the atmosphere. The situation grew desperate. That's when Alira made her move. She pushed her ship forward, breaking through the enemy's inner wall, heading straight for her father's flagship. Dodging fire, weaving through the enemy swarm, she reached the outer hull and crashed her ship into the side hangar, forcing her way inside. Alone, blade in hand, she moved through the metal halls that felt both familiar and foreign. She cut down guards without slowing, driven not by anger, but by purpose. She reached the throne room, the same one where years ago her father had handed her away like trash. King Vorax stood tall, armored in obsidian, waiting with a cruel smile. "You return, traitor," he said, "to die at my feet?" Alira didn't answer. She drew her blade and the duel began. Their swords clashed with blinding sparks. His strikes were strong, heavy, full of fury. Hers were fast, sharp, and filled with memory. She was not the same girl he had thrown away. She fought not to prove him wrong, but because she had found her own worth. The battle raged across the throne room, smashing pillars and shattering glass. In the end, her blade found his heart. As he collapsed, she looked into his fading eyes and said, "Not a gift. A warrior." She activated the beacon, and the human fleet saw it. The flagship had fallen. With their leader gone, the Zalith forces panicked. Human ships pressed the attack, pushing them back until the last cruiser fled. Earth was safe. Alira returned to the Valkyrie to the sound of quiet cheers and tears. They had survived. They had won. And the stars, once covered in darkness, now shone bright again. The war was over. The Zalith Empire, once feared across the stars, had bowed in defeat after the fall of their king and the destruction of their armada. Earth's skies were clear again, the stars shining brighter than they had in years. Alira stood beside Commander Jace on the balcony of the rebuilt Terran Council Hall, watching ships from every Alliance world arrive for the peace ceremony. It was a new era, one shaped not by old hatred, but by the courage of those who had fought, bled, and refused to be broken. Alira wore no crown and carried no title, yet all eyes turned to her when she entered the hall. Not because she was the daughter of a king, but because she had become something far greater, a living symbol of change. Her name was now spoken, with respect by both humans and Zalith. She had done what no one thought possible. She had helped destroy an empire, not through revenge, but through strength, choice, and hope. During the peace signing, she stood in silence as the new Zalith leader, a young warrior who had once fought under her father, approached with a trembling hand to sign the treaty. He nodded at her, unsure, but full of respect. She nodded back, not as an enemy, but as a guide to a better path. After the ceremony, she walked alone through the halls of the old Terran War Museum, her footsteps echoing among the displays of fallen ships and faded flags. She paused at a new exhibit, her old armor, scratched and scorched, displayed beside her first blade. A plaque read, "Alira of Two Worlds, the warrior who chose her own name." Her fingers brushed the glass. For the first time, she allowed herself to smile. Not for glory, not for pride, but because she had made it. She had survived the fire. Jace found her later outside, near the training grounds where young cadets were already sparring. "They're calling it the Alira style," he said with a small grin. "Hybrid technique. Fast, creative, built from everything you taught them." She turned to him, warmth in her eyes. "I didn't do it alone." "No," he agreed, "but you lit the first spark." She decided to stay, not as a soldier or a hero, but as a teacher. She began training the next generation, not just in battle, but in courage, in choices, in finding strength within. Her classes filled quickly. Cadets of all species came to learn, to ask, to grow. They listened when she spoke, not because she was loud, but because her story had reached their hearts. She taught them that it didn't matter where you were born. What mattered was what you chose to become. And every night, when the stars rose above Earth and the training grounds fell quiet, Alira stood beneath them and remembered the girl she once was, the one given away in shame. That girl was gone. In her place stood a warrior, forged not by power, but by pain, love, and choice. And in every student she trained, in every peaceful alliance she helped build, her story continued silent, strong, and everlasting.